So, why do we get aggressive? I mean, really, what makes us snap? It's one of the most fundamental questions about who we are. And, the answer isn't simple, but social psychology, it gives us this incredible lens to understand all the complicated forces at play. We're talking everything from the weather outside to the thoughts rattling around inside our own heads. So, let's get into it.
Come on, you've been there, right? We all have. You're driving, someone cuts you off, or maybe your roommate leaves one more dirty dish in the sink, and suddenly you feel this white-hot rage over something that's, let's be honest, pretty minor. What is happening in that moment? That's exactly the question we're going to break down.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, we need to lay some groundwork. First things first, not all aggression is created equal. There are different kinds, and telling them apart is absolutely crucial to understanding the whole picture.
So you can basically think of it in two main flavors. On one side, you have hostile aggression. This is that hot, impulsive, angry reaction. It's driven by pure emotion, and the goal is pretty straightforward, to hurt someone. But then you've got instrumental aggression. This is colder, more calculated. The harm isn't the point. It's just a way to get something else. Maybe it's money, maybe it's social status, or even a political goal. The aggression is just a tool.
Right, so it's not like there's some aggression switch in our brains that just flips from calm to furious. Psychologists have found it's much more of a process, a sequence of events that leads to an aggressive act.
And this model right here, the general aggression model, is basically the perfect roadmap for that process. So let's walk through it real quick. It all starts with inputs. That's a mix of you, the person, your personality, your beliefs, your current mood, and the situation, like that guy who just cut you off. These inputs then kick off the routes. This is what happens inside you. It affects your feelings, which they call affect, your thoughts or cognition, and your physical arousal. Your heart starts pounding. And finally, all that churning inside leads to an outcome. You might stop and think, or you might take that other path, the one that leads to an impulsive, aggressive action.
All right, let's zero in on those situational inputs for a second, because this is where things get really fascinating. Some of the triggers in our environment are things you would never expect. It proves that it's not always just about us and our personality. Sometimes it's literally about what's happening around us.
I mean, think about this for a second. Could something as simple, as mundane as a hot day actually make you more aggressive? It sounds kind of like something your grandma would say, right? Oh, it's the heat making everyone crazy. Well, the data is shockingly clear.
What's just wild about this chart is how consistent the pattern is. When the temperature goes up, so do violent crime rates. One of the leading theories for why is called misattribution of arousal. Basically, the heat makes you feel physically uncomfortable and agitated, but your brain doesn't necessarily pinpoint the temperature as the cause. Instead, it blames that agitated feeling on the person who just annoyed you, which makes an aggressive response feel way more justified. And of course, we have to talk about media. The research is pretty consistent here. In lab settings, exposing people to violent media, especially interactive stuff like video games, can ramp up aggressive thoughts and feelings. It can even make people less likely to be helpful afterward. But, and this is a huge but, it's really important to remember these are mostly lab studies. It is a massive leap to say that playing a video game directly causes real-world violence. The connection is there, for sure, but it is way more complex than people think.
Now here's another trigger that's incredibly powerful: social rejection. Being kicked out of a group or given the cold shoulder, that's not just a blow to your ego, it's a blow to your brain. Brain scans show that the emotional pain of being excluded activates the exact same brain region, the anterior cingulate, that lights up when you feel physical pain. So when people say rejection hurts, it's not a metaphor. Your brain is processing it like an actual injury, which can, in turn, prime you to want to hurt back.
And if we zoom the lens out even further, you can see how huge societal factors come into play. Just look at this graph. It's a pretty clear and troubling correlation. The wider the gap between the rich and the poor in a country, the higher the homicide rate tends to be. Things like inequality can create a powerful sense of frustration, injustice, and social friction, all of which can be a breeding ground for violence.
Okay, so we've seen how the situation, the world outside, can set the stage. But here's the thing. Two people can be in the exact same situation, and one will fly off the handle while the other just shrugs it off. The difference maker is what psychologists call construal. It's not just about what happens, but how our mind interprets what happens. This is where it gets really interesting. So let me just ask you this straight up. Do you think the mere presence of a weapon, not using it, not even touching it, just having it in the room, can make a person act more aggressively? The research on this is pretty mind-blowing.
Check this out. This is a famous study that perfectly demonstrates what's called the weapons effect.
Researchers got participants angry, then gave them the chance to give electric shocks to the person who annoyed them. Look at those dark green bars. When a gun was just sitting on a table in the room, the participants gave much stronger, more intense shocks compared to when there was no object there at all. The weapon itself primed their brain for aggression.
So just let that sink in for a second. The gun's presence didn't just give them the means to be more violent. Its presence acted as a psychological cue. In that moment of anger, it made an aggressive response seem more available, more appropriate, more top of mind.
Now here's another really dangerous mental shortcut our brains can take: dehumanization. This is the process where we stop seeing people in another group as, well, people. We stop seeing them as individuals with their own minds, feelings, and families, and instead, we start seeing them as something less than human.
This mental trick is profoundly dangerous. By stripping a group of its humanity, it basically flips an empathy switch off in our brains. It lets people bypass the normal, gut-level aversion we have to harming another person. And honestly, it's a cognitive process that has been a key ingredient in some of the worst atrocities in human history.
All right, so now let's pull the camera back even further. All these individual reactions and situational triggers, they don't just happen in a vacuum, right? They're all shaped by these much deeper, slower-moving currents: our culture, our gender, and even our evolutionary history.
Take, for example, something called the culture of honor. This is a cultural mindset you often see in places where, historically, people's livelihoods and safety depended on their reputation for toughness. In these cultures, an insult isn't just words, it's a direct threat to your status and respect, and it has to be answered, often with violence, to restore your honor.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. You can see it in the data. Now, if you look at murders that happened during another crime, like a robbery, the rates are pretty similar across the U.S. But look at argument-related homicides. The rate is way higher in the South and Southwest, regions that have been historically linked to this culture of honor. A simple argument is more likely to escalate into something deadly.
Gender, of course, plays a huge role here, too. Statistically, it's undeniable that men commit far more violent crime, but that doesn't mean women aren't aggressive. Their aggression just tends to look different. It's often more relational, things like spreading rumors, sabotaging social relationships, or excluding someone from a group. So why the difference? Well, one really interesting idea is the precarious manhood hypothesis. It suggests that in many cultures, manhood is treated as a fragile status that has to be earned and can easily be lost. So when a man's status feels threatened, aggression can become a way to prove or reclaim his manhood.
Okay, we have gone through a lot of the dark stuff. The triggers, the biases, the pathways to aggression. It can feel a little bleak, but the story absolutely does not end there. Because understanding where conflict comes from also gives us the map to build pathways toward peace. You know, when we're angry, our first instinct is usually to pull away, to build up walls. But the research is crystal clear on this. The single most powerful tool for resolving conflict is often the one we want to do the least in that moment. Just simple, direct, face-to-face communication. It's incredibly hard to dehumanize someone when you're actually talking to them and looking them in the eye.
And this brings us to probably the most surprising fact of this whole explainer. I know, it doesn't feel like it when you turn on the news, but if you look at the broad sweep of human history, we are, right now, living in one of the least violent and most cooperative eras our species has ever known. The long-term data shows a clear downward trend in violence. Despite everything, we are getting better at this.
So, the final thought is really this: aggression isn't our destiny. We've seen the inputs, the hot weather, the social slights, the cultural scripts. We understand the internal routes our minds can take. And knowing all that, knowing your own triggers, that gives you power. It gives you that crucial space to pause, to see the situation differently, and ultimately to choose a different, more peaceful path.